As many of you know, I'm an old tube radio collector, and I just happened to find a Sansei model Holiday. This is an AM/FM vacuum tube radio from 1960, 61, somewhere in there. It's a plastic case. I remember one of these from my childhood. My parents had one in the kitchen for years. Slightly different model. Theirs was a dual speaker, but still mono on FM. But I just happened to find one, and I had to pick it up. I found this little radio up for sale locally. I figured I had to grab this because it's something I don't have. I have quite a few AM and shortwave tube radios, but one thing I don't have, and I've always wanted, was an AM/FM tube radio to add to my collection of portable radios, and this one here is in not bad shape. It's not a stereo radio. My parents had one very similar to this. In fact, it looked almost identical, but it was a dual speaker, but it was not stereo. It was just a mono dual speaker radio, but very, very similar to this. I'd love to find an FM stereo tube radio, and I'm going to keep my eyes peeled for one. But now I've got an AM/FM mono tube radio to add to my collection, and before I power this up, we're going to do a service on it and make sure that everything checks out and change out any paper capacitors that are found in this unit itself. Let's take a look at the back. This radio was made by Sansei Electronics Corporation of Japan. It would have been made around 1960. It's an AC/DC receiver. It's got 6 tubes and 2 diodes in it, and it'll operate between 105 and 120 volts DC or 50 to 60 cycles AC. And it says it draws 35 watts at 117 volts. So there's no transformer in this. The filaments are all going to be wired in series to provide the correct voltage drop across the filaments. And here's the complement of tubes that it contains. So it contains a 12AV6, a 12BE6, a 17EW8, a 12BA6, another 12BA6, and a 50EH5. And this one here, I think would probably be, that's going to be the audio output, I would think. And the other ones are going to be the RF amplifiers, mixers, and so forth. This one's completed with the safety interlock. So let's pull the back off this little set and just take a look at it before I'm not going to power it up until I've done a complete safety inspection on it and replace any paper capacitors that may be found. So the back comes off with just some thumb screws, little plastic screws that you can undo by hand. And this features an interlock cord. So when the back is removed, it disconnects the power cord for safety, because these ones here were a hot chassis. So the actual circuit board is going to be connected directly to one side of the power line. So to pull the back off, here's the chassis itself. It's going to remove the back completely. And here's the inside of the radio. And I don't see any paper condensers on this thing. Do I not have to do anything to this unit other than check it over? It looks very clean inside. I see a lot of ceramic capacitors, which are not going to be problematic, but I don't see any of those troublesome paper. I see a electrolytic cap. Very nice looking little chassis. If I want to take the chassis out, I have to actually remove a couple screws from the front, I think, that hold it in place, or does it slide out? I think there's a couple screws that have to come out to remove the chassis from this plastic cabinet. This radio doesn't look like it's ever... Oh yes, it's been serviced. You can see the screws have been removed. They were paint sealed. So the screws have been removed on this radio at one point to service it. But just looking in the back here, I don't see any capacitors that I really need to worry about. I don't see any paper caps. Let's get a closer look at this chassis. So I'm going to pull the chassis. So to do that, I'm going to remove the knobs, the tuning, the AM/FM knob, and the volume power knob. As you can see, the knobs themselves are actually protected, so you can't touch easily if the knob is removed. It's in behind a plastic cover. That's to provide you some protection if the knob were to fall off. You're not going to accidentally touch it. can't tune it. You'd end up having to use a screwdriver to tune the stations if the knobs are removed, because these are critical insulation material to insulate you from the chassis, because this chassis is going to be directly connected, as I say, to one side of the power line. Next thing I'll do is I'll remove the chassis itself. Grab my screwdriver. And it uses just a slot screw. So let's grab my smaller pick quick. Grab the slot bit, so I can remove the two screws at the front here that hold the chassis in place. And then the chassis will just slide out. This is going to make sure nothing's catching on anything. Oh, you know what? You got to release the tuning dial from the front, because the string goes across the front here. So how do I take that out, or don't I? A little more of a challenge, because the actual tuning dial itself, it's held in place with its own screws, and it does not slide out with the rest of it. You can see the tuning cord is attached. So initially I had intended to pull the chassis so I could give you guys a close-up look at the actual chassis itself and how well this thing is built. But we're gonna have to take a look at it just through the base here. You see down here at the front, which I can't even reach with my screwdriver, but at the front you'll see a screw there on a metal bracket, and that metal bracket is what has the tuning, the pointer is mounted to that, and then it is also looped in, goes through a slot, and it sticks up through the front here. So in order to take the chassis out, that bracket has to be removed, and then the pointer pulled down through the cabinet so that the chassis can be pulled back. And then to put it back together, you got to slide the chassis in with the pointer on it and get it into the slot, and then put that back piece back on it, which is a lot of work, because where the screws are located, as you can see, well, one of them is in behind this transformer and main filter capacitor down here, and the other one is in, well, it's in behind the tuning capacitor. So very difficult to get at, to do. I'm looking at the design of this thing, and it's like, how did they ever put this thing together at the factory? Obviously, someone with very small hands to reach in there. I'm certainly not getting my fingers in there. In fact, even changing the tube that's in behind these two IF transformers would be difficult. And even doing the alignment on this thing would be extremely difficult, because you would need to pull the chassis to do the alignment. And you can't pull the chassis out more than about 3/4 of an inch without that tuning string becoming tight. I'm not going to remove it, because I just picked this radio up and I really don't want to create more work than I really need to do. I was thinking I was going to have to change all the capacitors, because I was expecting this thing to be loaded with paper capacitors, but as you can see, there actually are none. They're all, there's a couple of electrolytics here. There's a little 2 microfarad at 50 volts, and then there's a filter, a main filter back here, the multi-stage can, which is the main filter. I will probably need to clean the switches and the volume control, but I can access them down through here to do that, to give them a shot of cleaner. And I'll give them a shot of cleaner before we power it up, just to make sure everything's clean. I thought initially this would have had a tube rectifier, but it's actually not. It's actually a solid state rectifier. The 2 diodes that are listed are the diodes for the AC to DC rectification. As you can see, it's nice point-to-point wiring. There's no problem with the wires themselves. Insulation looks to be in good condition. I don't see anything that's indicating that there's going to be any hazards. So let's clean the controls and then power the unit up and see what it does. So I'll just get my Canon neutral in and give the volume control and the band selector a bit of a shot. And yes, I am shooting this in 60 frames again, as 24 is just too stroby for my liking. There's the band selector switch and the volume control. Okay, let's power the unit up. For this, I'm going to use my dim bulb tester on my cheater cord with alligator clips, and to show you how this works. If something draws excessive current, there's a light bulb that's right up there. It's a 100-watt incandescent bulb, and it's in series with these test clips. So if I turn on the power and I short the test clips together, okay, so in worst case scenario, a dead short is going to be limited to 1 amp, or approximately 1 amp, and that light is going to light up there. We don't want to see that light up. So, onto the back. Polarity does not matter. It's AC after all. We clip on. We turn on the power and turn on the power to the radio. We'll see the light probably light up momentarily as the inrush current for the tubes start heating the tubes. There we go. We've got a bit of an inrush current there, and then it went down very dim because the filaments are now starting to warm up. Of course, the filaments, when they're cold, tungsten, when it's cold, is a very low resistance, and then as it warms up, the resistance starts to go up. You can see that this thing's drawing very little power.
Canadian golf. It's a huge. We're just posted 800.
I hear a lot of hum.
Congrats, man.
I'm trying to see the sun.
Yeah. So when you wake up, it needs
Arena. In under 24 hours, we'll know Canada's group for the FIFA World Cup.
So that is
the draw
AM.
goes tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific in Doha, Qatar, the site of the tournament's opening match, November 21st. The 4 pots for the 32-team draw are divvied up by...
That's FM.
Canada is in pot 4.
It's marked as FM down here, and AM,
will have the
but it's
Sportsnet
actually,
soccer
turn it to the left for FM.
break down the results. Sports
that's
15
AM.
and 45 past the hour, or visit sportsnet.ca.
4:17 at City News, still 11 degrees in downtown.
You close west of 192th Street.
.com.
A Flexi line by Capital Direct allows you to manage your resources. And somebody's hardcore gaming and our internet's fantastic. That's what you like to hear, Stephanie.
Okay, so we know it's working. We're not drawing excessive current. I'm just going to plug it directly in, and that way we'll get full voltage to the radio, because right now we're running obviously at a reduced voltage.
Get clicking on Thompson Industries stuff. That they can pull out very easily.
Very sensitive.
Even if you make that change. पहले कॉलर पे क्या जरनैल सिंह जी? कितने केजरीवाल उदो माफी.
Dials off a little bit.
I maybe people.
It's like FM. This is the FM antenna.
And the deposit is...
My test transmitter.
personally invite you to our...
A little bit off as far as the position on the dial goes. I don't know if I can adjust that or not. Let's see if there's any adjustments for the tuner. There will be, but whether I can get at them without pulling the chassis, that's the question. It might be just the actual pointer is off out of adjustment a bit. It's pretty close. Yeah, that's 96.1.
20%的人表示，哎，我们从
96.9. That looks to be okay.
But we have to
88.1.
essentially, come up with sort of...
They're the size of the FM antenna that this thing has on it. It's a long wire for FM. Gives you an idea that the tuners back then weren't that sensitive. FM being a brand new band at the time, it was some of the old tuners were not all that sensitive, and they required a fairly good antenna. They needed a fair bit of signal in order to work, but this unit appears to be working just fine. I can tune the same thing in on my AM version of the same station. It's over here. Where is it?
Morning, but I mean...
Japanese corporate side could
is quite concerning, only from a consumption standpoint.
A little bit too strong. One thing I've noticed that as it warms up, I'm getting a lot of distortion that I'm going to have to investigate. Overloading. The signal from my little AM transmitter is so strong, I'm overloading the front end. But you can see the next station down, I'm at 1440. The next station down at 1410 is...
Seconds left. It was a pretty wild quarter, the worst in 2 years. What do you expect the biggest catalyst to be for the coming quarter? Is it going to be...
I think we have a bias resistor problem here in the output. Listen to the sound. Now I'll shut it off. Let it cool for a bit. Like this tube is being driven into overdrive and probably starting to heat up the transformer because it's drawing too much current. Could be a resistor that's gone bad here. Now listen, when I first turn it on, listen how much louder it is. And as it warms up, the volume will start to drop. I think this tube is being overdriven. We got a bias, it's on maybe a resistor that's going open. After it runs for a couple of minutes, the volume will start to drop and the distortion will start to come up. That's probably asbestos in the top here too. You can hear the sound. It's starting to distort. turn it off, let it cool, just for a few seconds. Now it's better. So I think we need to look at the bias for this output tube, because I get the sneaking suspicion that it doesn't have the correct bias on the grid. So the tube is conducting more than it needs to, which is going to draw the power down. It'll pull the B plus down as the tube warms up. So the tube's on the set. 17EW8, that's going to be this one over here. That's going to be the FM oscillator. 12BE6, 12BA6, and 12BA6. These are going to be the AM oscillator mixer and the IF tubes. 12AV6 is the audio preamp and probably the detector. The 50EH5, that's the output, and there's the output transformer right there. So I'm going to take a look and see if I can find any information on this. I'm going to change, there's a small 2 microfarad at 50 volt cap right down in here, electrolytic. I'm going to change that one out. We'll start with that one because it's one I can get at without too much difficulty, and just tack a new one in the bottom. Also could be a tube itself that's getting a bit weak. I haven't had much luck trying to find schematics for this radio. A lot of the Japanese just didn't release schematics for their radios when they turned them out. So schematics are few and far between for a lot of these old radios. Sometimes they just pasted like a paper print on the inside of the cabinet or the back, but no such luck with this one. So we'll clip out that old cap first and just try changing that and see if that changes anything, the way that it operates. As I can see where this goes right there. As there's a good chance that this cap is, well, it's going to be bad. It's a small electrolytic. For sure, this 2 microfarad at 50 will be open. Probably. The main filter also may need to be changed or bridged. That's a little more of a challenge to get to that one, that's for sure. So let's just take a look at the ESR on this one. Actually, it doesn't measure bad, does it? 3.3. For a 60-year-old capacitor, it's measuring 4.78 microfarads. A new one, well, this is the 2.2 that I've got, will measure 2.3. So its capacity has definitely gone up in value, for sure. It may even be getting internally leaky. Okay, radio's powered on now, it's warmed up. We're letting it run for a few minutes to see whether that sound's going to get distorted or whether it's going to stay clear. It's been running for a couple minutes now. We'll let it run for another 5 minutes or so, because it tended to be clear for the first minute or two, and then it started to gradually get distorted.
Kind of conclude, at least from his perspective.
Lots of volume now, a lot more than I had before.
His outlook is for this downturn to occur over the next 18 months.
Let's go. I love it. I see you.
I've sold
sold out. 1010 still got plenty of space. And what else do we have here? Let's see. Look, the institution is receiving the fair share of the pie.
Gould says he hopes the review will also highlight problems of affordability for students dealing with rising tuition.
Sorry, Carlson, CPD is trained no patadi to law.
I'm a cowboy on a steel. 3. Jason Protest, CBC News, Vancouver.
And finally, students are back in class at an Abbotsford.
Yeah, that's made a huge difference. That one cap.
Rain event last year.
That one cap has made one huge difference. Because by now the sound would have started to fall off and it was starting to get distorted.
Busy recess on the playground at Upper Sumas Elementary in Abbotsford. Of students like grade 5 Jordan Epp.
It's more familiar. Everything is where I remember it.
Lovely. It is one of my dreams. I've been in the Okanagan. I've seen sort of the light effect, but not really like in the north. A friend of mine was just at the, the Ice Hotel in Sweden, and they were actually chasing the Aurora Borealis because there's an app now that will show you where you can see it. So they were on snowmobiles at night chasing the Aurora Borealis. So there are areas where you could see it very, very strong and bright. So that would be my dream vacation right there. I love that idea. Why don't you take us through traffic back here down to reality?
Well, in Richmond, an incident westbound on the east-west connector near Fraserwood is slowing down.
Yeah, I think this is sounding good now.
Things start to slow down at the split. And since we're...
Saturday night. I can't get you off of my... For a good time.
A Fit for Less gym membership is now just $6.99 every...
Without you here.
On an overseas tour since 2019, obviously due to...
There's my AM reception of my test transmitter now. Yeah. Oh, that distortion's gone.
We're going to expedite the arrival, and so far we are seeing this is one of the large...
Into the season with a new phone and an ultimate plan on Canada's best 5G network.
No, for most New Democrats, when the public think you're doing...
AM 730, all traffic, all the time.
First. Sixth wave of the virus. And this comes as COVID mandates are lifting across the country, and that has a lot of Canadians asking...
Great Canadian oil change one in the patach.
Interesting just to talk to some of the health authorities this week. I'm really...
Well, I'm going to say that this one's done. Let's throw the back on it. I'll just disconnect my power and unplug the cheater cord. We'll get the back on this one and give it a listen on how it sounds with the back on. Because that'll, I think, improve the sound a little bit due to the back baffling the sound from the speaker a little. Man, this thing's got a long antenna on. I can't get over how long they put a wire on this thing. Like that thing's like 5 feet long. I guess because back in the day, the old radios were not quite as sensitive as the more modern ones, at least for FM. Okay, we're going to line up the pins of the cheater cord. Power cord, I should say. Not really a cheater cord. It's only a cheater cord if you've taken it off the back. We'll line up the pins and plug it back in like that. And then I can put the 3 screws back into the back. So these would have been known as an SEC. As old as I am, or a little bit older, I think this radio is probably 1960, 61. I could find no info on this one. I did find some info on some other radios. I found this schematic, which is not quite correct. And then I found this one here. This is a schematic for an Onkyo, which is, well, it's impossible to read, but it's got the right tubes in it. It's impossible to read it though, it's just so bad. This one here is close. The output tube is different. The capacitor I changed would have probably been this one right here, I think. The equivalent of that one, that's the electrolytic. It's in the grid, right? It's in the grid for the output. That would have been the electrolytic cap that was changed. On this one it shows it as a, or 10 microfarad, sorry. Where is it on this one? And on this one it shows, geez, you know, it's so hard to read. It looks like it might be that one right there. Anyway, it's the schematic is just an absolute joke. Impossible to read. The only other electrolytics on this are the main filter caps, which would be like a 2 or 3 part cap, but they appear to be okay because I don't hear any AC hum. Tubes warm up. Gotta position the antenna. Anyway, there's my little AM FM tube radio. I've now got a tube radio to my collection. As I say, this radio here brings back a lot of memories from when I was a kid because we had a radio just like this, very, very similar. I'm pretty sure it was the same brand because I do remember the dial on it, and the one I remember us having, it had 2 speakers, but it was not stereo. It was a dual speaker, so it was, I think, a little bit bigger than this. It might have been to like the same distance on this side of the dial, so like out to here, but it looked the same. It was the same color. Was plastic. This is not a Bakelite, this is plastic. And this radio here is in very good condition. There's a slight little bit of warpage right here, and the reason it's warping a bit here is because that's where the heat is from the output tube. This part gets warm, and just over the years it's caused the plastic to warp ever so slightly. But I'm pretty happy that I found this one to add to my collection. As they say, he who dies with the most radios wins. Well, I'm not there yet. I got a long ways to go to add to my collection, but this is now one in my collection, and now I'm going to be looking for an FM stereo tube radio to add to my collection. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one real soon. Bye for now.